No.
Lila's vampire. Is it a big red button?
It pretty much is. It's just right over here. It's a big blue button that says "Go Live."
There should be a green button.
But I don't see it actually happening. Okay, now it's starting up.
Okay, well, secret society.
Yeah,
Good.
I think it's...
We have a commercial.
Ooh, get that money. Ooh.
Exactly. So, all right. So let me. This is all fucked up now.
Yeah.
As usual.
Technical difficulties, guys. Stay with us.
Have I sent you pictures of Zafara? Have I sent you pictures of my new baby?
The kitty?
Well,
or the
kitty, yes, but I got a kitty.
I think I saw one picture of your boyfriend and you're like, ooh, guess who's moving in? Very cute, by the way.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I saw that. I was like, have my number. No,
all right, there we go. All right, so now we are live, and now people can see the other people who are talking. So my apologies. The reason why I haven't gone live in so long is because Google has changed the YouTube alphabet, whatever they're called. They changed the Google Hangout function, so you can't just have a Google Hangout anymore. You have to have some other form of OBS or Zoom or some whatever. You have to have some other program to go live. So I was fiddling with OBS, finally got it to work. So I'm joined here with Amber and Zavora.
Hi, guys.
Greetings.
But they're sharing a screen, so you'll only see one of them when they're talking. So this is a very rough run.
We'll try to be good and not talk over each other.
Yeah, we'll try.
Yeah.
So let me see. How is this? It looks good on our end. So, good. And I'll keep an eye on the chat, too.
Oh, yeah, I can moderate the chat.
Yeah. So we thought we would talk about atheistic witchcraft, because I think that it's something that I think a lot more people are warming up to that idea and feeling more comfortable expressing themselves that way. But I think there's also a lot of questions and a lot of stigmas that might come up around it. So we kind of thought up some ideas of stuff that we could talk about. And this might become a series. I think there's a lot of information to talk about, so we might have this on a recurring basis. We might have other people on, and as I get this thing figured out, we'll see what capabilities we can do. But why don't we start off with Amber? Why don't we talk about how you view gods and deities?
Personally, I don't believe in them. Because I believe in ghosts, it made sense to me that people thought gods were like really OP spirits. They thought they were gods. You know, they just move stuff around or murder a cow or something, you know. I don't know about, but I sure as hell know that there's not gods, and if there are, they're not powerful. Not nearly as powerful as people give them credit for. Or they could just be people, you know. I just personally don't believe that they're there in any sense.
Okay. And what about you, Zabora? What do you think?
For me, if they're real, the best explanation that I could kind of cement down was that they're archetypes. So, because I'm a witch and I do believe in energy manipulation and change through witchcraft and whatnot, I always thought that the deities were entities that we create, sort of like an egregore or a servitor that we give energy to through praise, worship, offerings, thoughts in general, and that these entities kind of grew and became deities. So for me, if they're real, this would be the way that I kind of interpret them, as being an extension of the human imagination, human emotions, because I've studied a lot of different pantheons, and for me, I find all the gods to be very human. They have human emotions, human likes, human dislikes, rage, love, happiness. So for me, they're just an extension of us with superpowers.
Interesting. Yeah, because the way that my relationship and my interpretation of deities has evolved over the years. I think I started out pretty much as a monotheist, and then I moved over into more of a polytheistic viewpoint, and then moved into a more atheistic viewpoint of deity. Now, atheistic, I should say agnostic. I know people get into really particulars about dialogue, but I say agnostic originally because it's not that I don't believe in them, it's just that I don't have enough evidence for it. That's just the way it is. There very well may be beings outside of that we would consider to be deities, but I don't believe we've encountered them. They may exist, they may not exist. I don't know. But the only thing I can go with is the information that I have. And the way that I view deities now is I see them as representations of the self. It's like a personification of an egregore, like I think Amber mentioned that earlier. Somebody mentioned it. But that's how I view it. So, especially if you look at the Greek and the Roman pantheons, they're very human. They get into little squabbles, they get jealous, they get envious, they have little fights, they cause trouble, all these various things, very human traits. And I think that this is an interesting view that must have evolved over a period of time, sometime in the Middle Ages, because we moved away from this idea of deity being accessible, through human relationship, to being something that is beyond human, some outside of our scope of understanding and our knowledge. And I think that that's where, especially the Christian God started becoming how can I describe it? A non-human. It became greater than human. So, I don't know. I mean, that's just a theory that I have. It's something that it's a working hypothesis, if you will. But that's how I view deities and gods.
So it's somewhat similar to the way that I view them, as like egregores that kind of got too big for their britches, but then changed again with the Crusades and stuff, and kind of the Abrahamic God sort of took prominence with omnipresent, omnipotent, and all the followers say, well, God is perfect, you cannot understand his plan, kind of thing. Where it becomes larger than life, becomes larger than the people he's supposed to care about, kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's just a different way of relating to a God. Whereas I feel, and again, this is just, we don't have any records of how ancient people actually viewed gods, except for the mythologies, artistic representations. But mostly we just have mythology. Mythology is how almost all of us get to understand gods. We can look at images, say carved on stone, or statues of gods, and we can try to understand them and relate to them today, but we don't exactly understand how, for example, the pre-Greco people viewed their gods. I don't think we really understand it that well.
Well, yeah, because they were dealing with like a tribal kind of people, like typically nomadic, and it's all trade, and it's not like a civilization yet, because like pre-Greek, pre-Hellenistic kind of area, pre-Egyptian, pre-Sumerian, pre-civilization, they probably didn't have cemented views. It was probably more animalistic, but it's hard to say because each people would have been different. Like the Yoruba religion, they have a primary deity who created everything that's more pantheistic, like he cannot connect with the humans. He uses the Orishas to go between, and they're kind of similar to like Catholic saints, I would say. They're deities, but some of them are mortal, some of them weren't. So I would say closer to the Catholic saint. So.
And what culture does that come from? What culture and time period?
So the Yoruba religion would have been, it's a modern day thing, but it ties back, that we've documented it to slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. Because the Yoruba religion sort of transformed, it kind of comes from Central and Western Africa, and it transformed into modern day, hoodoo, voodoo, Haitian practices and stuff like that, Caribbean practices, because it mixed with other cultures and kind of became its own thing.
Mm-hmm. So the culture is probably
African
culture.
Yeah.
And like, well, when was the slave trade? Like between 15th to 18th, 15th to 19th century.
I would say 15th to, I think it was, 15th to 19th century. And the periods that are documented, I think with the British would be, I think it would be 15th, because I don't know about Dutch, because I know I think the Dutch actually started slave trade before the British. They started raiding Africa for slaves.
Yeah, I was thinking of like when, I was just trying to get an idea of when the Aruba, like what time period that would be, but. Okay.
Right. It's still going strong to this day from my understanding, but, like the 1700s.
I mean, like, your different, like, perspectives on it sound entirely plausible to me. I haven't come across, I don't know everything. And I haven't come across to anything that I would quantify, or an entity that I would quantify as a god. So who knows, really?
Well, that's okay. I haven't come across any entities I would classify as ghosts or spirits, so it's totally fine.
Yeah.
Like me, for some reason. I didn't choose this, okay?
But that is interesting. I mean, but when I think of the word God, when I think of something that is superhuman, it's extra human, it's superhuman. When I think of deities, so I would think of something that would have beyond normal means of interaction. Like we wouldn't feel them, we wouldn't see them, we wouldn't hear them. This is how I would view them. But how would they communicate with us, assuming that they exist? How would they interact with us? And it seems like a lot of people just assume that they go by faith, or they go by maybe some form of communication. Usually it's centered on themselves. It's a very subjective, but it's a personal connection. That's how I view deities, and I just don't have that. I don't have that. There was a time when I was polytheistic, where I would pray to deities, but it was always a one-way communication. That's the way I perceive it. Other people may have different perception of it.
No, I would have to agree with you on that, because I've always kind of struggled with the God concept. Being raised in a Christian home, everyone accepts there's a God. Everyone tells you there's a God. And a lot of people on this planet are theistic. So they all tell you that there's a God, and you need to accept this, and this is just fact. And when you're raised in that kind of an environment, at least for me, I knew Jesus and the Abrahamic God were not something I wanted to kind of believe in. I found the whole thing kind of horseshit by the time I was 12. But because of this idea of God's being real, I went looking for God. And I found witchcraft, of course. But for me, I've always kind of struggled with identifying with a deity and pulling on those kinds of energies until I sort of took on the atheist kind of mindset where for me, they're not actual beings. They're powerhouses that people have built up who worship and offer. Yeah. So, that's for me, that's when I was able to go, this is an aspect of human. I am human. I've tapped into this emotion through this ritual. That makes me feel stronger. And of course, I've accomplished my goal typically through magic. But, for me, I've always struggled with the God concept. I've never had any sort of that was God kind of idea. I've had so I have writer friends, and they kind of describe it as when that character just does that line, they spit out that line, and it's perfect for that character. I've had like 2 or 3 kind of those interactions where it's actually coming from you, but it's something that someone else would say. Does that make sense? Like, you understand the mentality of that other being that you're interacting with, so your mind creates what they would say. I've had those kind of interactions. Like, oh yeah, God gave that idea, but I understand now it's coming from me. That's kind of the way I've always thought about it.
There's definitely a difference. So as somebody who's been monotheistic most of my life, I was, because I grew up Christian, there's a difference between accomplishing something when you believe in a God and then accomplishing something when you don't. It's like, it's a different feeling. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just, you feel more grateful when you believe in you believe somebody is, or God has helped you through that, and that wasn't done on your own, versus, oh, I've been a responsible dog, I got that job, or I paid my bills, yay me. It's definitely different feelings, different mindsets.
I think I might have to, somewhat disagree. Say that it feels different for me, because it feels better knowing that I did something on my own versus someone helping me or something watching out for me. But I do know that idea of someone watching out for you kind of can make you feel better. So, and I think I've had a few of those experiences as well. But the idea of me doing something kind of always felt better to me. Just to me. That's how I feel.
Would agree. I would agree with that statement.
Maybe it's my ego.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, I think that it's, like I said, my relationship with the gods have evolved, and now I see them very much as aspects of human personality. I think that that's what they represent, and they're kind of like the microcosm of our interactions with one another. You look at mythology. Mythology is a very good example of that, and it ties into a lot of the other things that pagans and witches get involved in, and that is symbolic representation. Certain animals can be representations of various gods. So there's perceptions that we have on animals and how we perceive things. One good example is owls and wisdom and Athena. Those are the associations that we have with owls, and then owls are associated with Athena. So we kind of already begin to break up gods over certain realms of human labors and human interactions. We'll have blacksmith gods, and we'll have war gods, and we'll have healing gods, and we'll have gods of the heart, gods of the home, gods of various celebrations, gods of life, gods of death, gods of love. So we have these gods that represent these various aspects of ourselves. And I remember early on when I was reading, I forget exactly what it was. There was a book a long time ago that I read, and it was talking about I think it was Greek paganism, Greek pre-Christian religion, and there were atheist Greeks.
Oh, that was mine. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right. I was just wondering what it was. But they had talked about atheistic Greeks and the Greeks that didn't believe in gods, and that was the first time I had ever heard about something about that or read about something about that, and it was very fascinating, and it really got me thinking about stuff and thinking about relationships with gods and how we perceive gods.
I've always wondered if there were atheistic Greeks because, from my understanding, the word atheist is Greek. Mm-hmm. And it's actually what the Greeks called the Christians who didn't believe in their gods. Mm-hmm. So I think that's correct. I could be wrong. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. But, that's, from my understanding, a word that the Greeks used on the Christians, because they didn't believe in their God.
You don't believe in our gods, you don't believe in any God.
Well, atheist,
like self-God monsters is what that is.
Well, atheist, like I said, is without theism. So without my God, I guess that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Call them atheist. But yeah, atheist in itself can be a confusing word to a lot of people. I've always wondered if there were like atheistic Greeks. That's something that
there were philosophers. I mean, you can look them up online.
You mean like ancient Greeks?
Huh?
You're talking about like ancient Greeks, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant modern day Greeks. I'm like, I think some of them are atheists. I'm not sure. I know.
Well, I'm sure that back then there were probably thousands of them, but they just probably weren't. They weren't, especially in Europe. They weren't vocal about it because everybody was gung ho about the church, and if you didn't believe in God, you were a heretic. You know.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's probably a lot more atheists during that time because wearing a sheet isn't exactly Christian wear. So
wearing a sheet?
Yeah, because the toga looks it's a very poor frat boy joke.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Very bad on my part.
That's all right. I was just trying to. Okay.
Well, one of the questions that I do get kind of asked a lot, I don't know about you guys, but this actually pops up a lot on my YouTube, is how can you be an atheist and a witch?
That's just what I was going to segue into. Perfect.
Yeah. So that's actually something that kind of comes up a lot on my thing. And I'm here to tell you, as an atheist, my magic is not tied to any deities. My magic comes from myself, and I'm just as successful as those who have gods, I'm sure, if not more successful. I've got 20 years, bitches.
It's kind of like yoga. You can't really do it wrong unless you hurt yourself or strain yourself in some way.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just, that's kind of I've always found that funny because like Logan was saying, was wise owls of Athena. Well, there's cultures out there that don't have owls. There's cultures that have river gods but not sea gods. There's cultures that have desert gods but not rainforest gods, you know? So it's kind of an interesting concept. It's like, well, what makes your theism true and everybody else's wrong? Like, why is your witchcraft correct because you have Hecate and my witchcraft, who has no deity, is wrong when it's just as effective? So what about your deity influences your path? How does that add to your path? Because I've never found any kind of real benefit to adding any sort of deity outside of that specific emotion I'm working with. For me, that's just how I feel.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I mean, my opinion is pretty much unchanged as it always is. I mean, I really don't care what you practice as long as you don't hurt anybody or hurt yourself. You know, everybody's going to have a different belief. Even if you have people who, quote unquote, identify with the same tradition, you're going to have people within that tradition who have different viewpoints. You know, we're all individuals. We all have our way of approaching things, and I think that assuming that there's some kind of a cookie cutter in witchcraft is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And, that's why I always think it's funny when people point out things about... It's one of the reasons why I've separated myself from, this one Facebook group that I was in. Because I just felt that this group was... they're just perpetuating trash. They're regurgitating the same thing. And, one person does a video on it, and then other people do a video on it. And... They're mimicking each other. They're not really breaking out of the mold and thinking and going into the historical records and finding out what their identity, what they believe in, what it actually meant, and how it's evolved. People are practicing like they believe that witches would have practiced in 15th, 13th century, if that. Most of that record is based on church knowledge. That's all church. That's all secondhand information. So the chances that information is going to be 100% accurate and free of any kind of religious dogma, Christian religious dogma, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with Christian religion, but it's not very compatible with a paganistic view of life in the world.
I was going to say historical view, but, it's not compatible with a historical view.
Yeah, look at the goddess Ostara, okay? Apparently she didn't exist until Bode, as a Christian monk, invented her as some kind of pagan answer to Easter. And I don't know if they had a harvest goddess. I'm sure that the Celtic had some sort of harvest god or something, but it wasn't Ostara, from my understanding.
Sorry, I missed that. You mean the Celtic gods? Yeah, no. Ostara is from, and I don't even know how to pronounce her name correctly. But that's from the northern. That's from the northern tribes. That was more Norse.
Yeah, she's the goddess of dawn. I've been watching American Gods and catching up on all of that.
Oh, I haven't seen any of that, but
it's good. I recommend it.
From my understanding, she's not even a real deity that was worshipped by the ancient people. She was a fabrication of a Christian monk, Bode. From my understanding, I could be wrong about this, but it's not actually...
B-I-D-E?
Was it B-O-D-E?
Oh, B-O-D-E. And Ostara as in O-S-T-A-R-A or E-O-S-T-R-E? Ostara.
I don't know. Are they separate entities?
From my understanding, and maybe somebody who's in the chat who's more familiar with Norse heathenism or Norse paganism can chime in. But my understanding was that there was a Germanic goddess named Eostara, E-O-S-T-R-E-E, E-O-S-T-R-E.
Well, it's entirely possible that both of them are correct. They're just from different peoples who shared similar deities.
Well, that's another thing, is I think that we're kind of getting off topic, but it's kind of in the same direction. I think that in the 60s, there was a lot of people who wanted a nice, neat framework of witchcraft and paganism and druidism, so they really tried to kind of force it, and this is where we got a lot of the new age crap coming in, and we got a lot of people trying to force, Mabon and Ostara and all these other, fill out the wheel of the year perfectly, but we don't. We don't have a deity that's associated with the spring equinox or the fall equinox, or even solstices. That we are aware of, that we have evidence for. And I think that from that point, a lot of people started including stuff that probably didn't exist, or they may have, taken a little truthful liberty with it.
Oh, it's like you said, you have the migration, you have the individual tribes who each practice it their own way, and those tribes, the Vikings themselves had massive colonies up and down America, Canada, into Russia. The Vikings were very prolific. And then you have the migration of the Germanic people into the British Isles. So you actually have like two branches of my family. There are the Scottish McDonald's, and then there are the Irish McDonald's, which actually are the clan heads of my group, my family, which are the Heights, the Irish Heights. And they shared similar deities being from the same people, but they're separated now by, like Ireland and England. So you have the migration, you have the individual tribes, each with their own ideas, bringing different stuff to the table, and then things evolve based on other contact with other cultures. So it kind of makes sense that the deities themselves would change over time. Like my personal favorite being the Egyptian pantheon and Sekhmet. She's 100% a war goddess and a healing goddess. But most pagans today view her as a peace goddess and not necessarily a war goddess. So it's understandable that you have these changes.
And peace happens after a while.
Yeah. Yeah, and then people wanting to put everything in nice, neat boxes, which can't have the Egyptian pantheon. So they take from other sources, outside sources, Christian sources, whatever. So it kind of makes sense the way things kind of come together when you really look at the history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you want to chime in on it, Amber?
I mean, there's not a lot from it because I haven't been, unless it's kind of like the Greek pantheon, I don't really pay attention to a lot of like the different deities. I do know quite a bit about like the origins of Christianity because it's mostly what I deal with on a day-to-day basis. But pagan gods, not so much. I really think I should change that because it's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. So I was hoping to hear back from somebody in chat, and I know Animus is very familiar with it. Animus says that there is only one author. Excuse me. There is only one author who claimed a historical reference to Ostara, O-S-T-A-R-A, among Germanics, and this could not be confirmed or found anywhere else. So my understanding, and again, I try to stay on top of stuff, but some, information moves pretty fast. Sometimes I can be wrong about stuff, but my understanding is that Ostara, O-S-T-A-R-A, was not a goddess. This was like a misspelling or a mistranslation. But the term Ostara, God, I did a video on this. It is based on an actual Germanic goddess. This is my understanding. Whose animal was a hare, and her name was Eostre, E-O-S-T-R-E. Anyhow, I don't know. I mean, I could have that wrong. I know that I did a video on it, and sometimes some stuff I just don't recall, and then other stuff I do recall. And I know that there's something about the name and the goddess. There is a goddess around this time of year, but I think because somehow Easter got confused in there, and people, I don't know, they just, I don't know exactly, and at this point I'm just speculating.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I find myself doing I try to do educational videos for pagans, because I've seen some nonsense, like Logan said, come out of the pagan community. Like Ishtar being linked to Ostara and Easter. And I'm like, Ishtar's animal was not the hare, it was the lion. Just because they sound similar doesn't mean that they're the same. Causation or correlation is not causation. But I don't know about you guys. That's something I find myself arguing with even.
I've been buying eggs from the wrong animal, apparently.
I've
been buying eggs from the wrong animal, apparently.
So we kind of got a little distracted when we were talking about that, but I think we should come back to the topic of witchcraft and atheism, because one thing that I often see is the division that people make between the idea of witchcraft and religion being separate, being two different things. And I know I did a video on this a long time ago, but there was a point where the concept of magic and religion was very murky, And that I think that kind of maybe took some kind of a split when monotheism rose. But I mean, even in magical circles, magic today, there's a great deal of Christian magic in it. You can look at the Kabbalah; it's filled with Christian magic.
Yeah, and Passover with the blood and the stuff. That's called blood magic, man.
Huh?
Because they use the Passover, they use the lamb's blood to ward off the evil spirit. That's called witchcraft. Yeah, there's like a lot of like lighting the candles and doing all kinds of stuff.
Well, Jesus being sacrificed, the human sacrifice, that's magic. That's blood magic.
Yeah, exactly.
What the hell is blood magic?
Oh, well, it's using live things. So boring.
Okay. Well, it depends on how you define magic. So if you're going with kind of the traditional sense that most people think of, it's a supernatural event that is brought about by a certain action. Okay, so like we kind of see magic as change through ourselves or change through energy manipulation. If you look at the story of the crucifixion, Jesus, him dying and bleeding, the blood of the lamb, is supposed to offer a cleansing. It's a cleansing ritual for the entire world. We're supposed to be cleansed up of our sin through his blood. So it's a blood rite ritual. It's a blood magic ritual. It's a magic ritual involving blood. So for me, blood magic is magic involving blood. If as a correspondent or as the main component. So that's kind of the idea of Christianity being blood magic or the
communion.
Yeah, maybe I should have rephrased that. I mean, what is the source for that? Is that coming from an anthropological point of view, or is it coming from the practice description? Do you know what I mean?
And how it's described in the Bible is very witchcraft kind of deal. Communion, Passover, who was it? Abraham. I think it was Abraham made a statue of bronze snakes, and suddenly everyone got healed from all the snake bites they were getting. I think.
Okay, so that's a term that comes from the Bible, like blood magic.
No. I think it's a descriptive thing.
Yeah,
I know, but I'm trying to figure out where does the description come from? It's like me saying cottage cheese magic. You know, I practice cottage cheese magic. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's like, what is that? Is that an anthropological term, or where does it come from?
It's just magical rituals that have blood used in them. So, like, pricking your finger or something.
Okay, so somebody at some point in time determined that this was going to be called blood magic, and people have been repeating it ever since, right?
Yeah. Why is green magic called green magic? Because it has to deal with nature and growing plants. Who came up with that,
Well, yeah, but I mean, but there were tribes that did rain magic. I'm just wondering, which culture invented blood magic?
I don't know. I could not answer that.
I'm just thinking it's a very poor, in my opinion. I mean, you can use it as much as you want, but in my opinion, I find it lacks something. Like I could say, anthropomorphic magic, or what's it called? Contagious magic or sympathetic magic, because those are anthropological terms. Or I could use the term, circle magic or occult magic, or I could call something magic and then put on a name before it so it's associated with something. So it could be associated with a culture or a practice.
Okay. Well, I think that
Hold on. Okay. For me, it's more of an outsider looking in perspective. It's not so much that's what someone told me it was. I have my own understanding of what witchcraft and magic is, and for me, it's energy manipulation. It's change through a specific action. So the sacrifice, Jesus being killed, is the action. and it is through his perfect divine blood, because that is the whole point of Jewish ritual. They would slaughter goats and lambs and stuff. It's a sacrifice. It's a magical sacrifice. So as an outside person looking in, that would be the best way I could describe it. It is this blood magic ritual. I'm not sure about everybody else, but that is the best way that I personally, as an English-speaking individual, can describe it. It is something that caused change through this act of bleeding and death.
Okay.
So for me, it's a blood magic ritual.
Okay, so let me see if I understand it. So when you use the term blood magic, what you're referring to is specifically that event in the Bible?
Change through blood. No, it's any kind of magical change through use of blood.
Yeah.
Or blood being a primary component in a ritual.
See, this is completely, this is beyond my realm of understanding, because if I cut myself, I bleed, and that's it. You know.
But if you ritualistically cut yourself or prick your finger in order to use your blood to tie to a spell, like say you're making a black mirror, a lot of witches believe that if you put a piece of your DNA, such as blood, being associated with life, because hey, if you bleed out, you die, right? So this is kind of like my understanding of it is life or blood being a life kind of fluid, and it's linked to life, and life being the most powerful energy that is in existence. Okay. So that's kind of my understanding of it, and that's just the best way I can explain it. It's kind of like when you and I talk about ceremonial magic, we kind of have different understandings of it, even though we kind of do understand what each other is saying.
Yeah. So okay, so that I don't have any reference for that, but I do understand like ceremonial. I understand where the history of things come from, and my understanding of any kind of blood use is, you know, if you're going to, let's say I think in the Stephen Flowers book, the the Norse runes, you'll put blood on those. That's what I understand. But as for actual anything like that, I don't know of anything like that. There's nothing in the Key of Solomon. There's nothing in, I think that in the Picatrix it has all kinds of weird stuff in there. But a lot of that stuff, a lot of the bizarre, anytime you come across like bizarre things in most magical grimoires, they're actually usually referring to something else, like maybe an alchemical process or something. But this is another thing, and I apologize for putting you on the spot like this, but that's another thing that I believe is just bullshit. It's clouding the issues. I don't think it benefits us in the 21st century today. You know, I think that somebody had the idea of, you know, putting blood on something or consecrating it with blood, and somehow it caught on, and other people started talking about it like it was some kind of a normal practice or an average practice. But it doesn't have any historical roots that I'm aware of in any culture or any practice.
Yeah, that may very well be the case. But specifically with the idea of Jesus being the Lamb of God, Jesus being this perfect sacrifice, that comes from the Jewish tradition, because they would, of course, use lambs and perfect, baby kids, goats, not kids, not children. But baby goats, yeah. And because that's the animals that they would use. They were shepherds, they were herders. So the idea of Jesus being this perfect Lamb of God, this sacrifice, comes from that. It's a lot of the problem is that it's allegory. You know, me trying to tell you what it sounds like is blood magic, of course, is like the best description that I could come up with. I'm not sure how somebody else would describe it. But the idea of this animal dying and bleeding out is somehow supposed to cleanse the Jewish sins. So the idea of this person, this half mortal, half deity, dying and bleeding is supposed to cleanse your sins.
So
rituals.
All right. So now we're going back to the Bible. Okay. So in the Bible they talk about it. Okay.
Yeah, I think that was the point, is that in the Bible there's a lot of things that are very close to witchcraft, or in fact witchcraft.
You see, that's another thing that I don't see that at all. Because, and again, this is just my opinion, but the way that I perceive it is that, like, I've talked with Christians, and the Christians say, well, anything that falls under God is God. Anything that falls outside of God is the devil. So if any miracle happens in the Bible, it's just
witchcraft or not.
What?
That doesn't tell me if it's witchcraft or not. If somebody's personal, like, oh, this is God and this is not.
Witchcraft is not magic. Magic is not witchcraft. Those are two separate things. Witches practice magic, but witchcraft itself is like a descriptive term.
Yeah.
It's not the practice of magic. So when I talk about like Christian magic, for example, I usually am thinking of ceremonial magic, because there's a lot of, there's a lot of prayers in there. Yeah. And in the Bible, that's magical, that's Christian magic, or whatever they want to call it, but I wouldn't consider it witchcraft.
Well, no, that's something that that you and I, again, would disagree on, because we have different usages of the word. Like witchcraft, I believe for you is European based, right? It's something that came out of the British Isles, and it's practiced by a specific people. If I'm not misunderstanding you.
No, it's okay, but go ahead.
So like, I agree with Amber though that there is a lot of what I would consider spell work and magic in the Bible. Not as much as some people claim, because with voodoo, they had to hide their magic. They use a lot of the Psalms for magical workings, and I've read Ray Buckland's book, Candle Magic, and he actually has like the Wiccan-based version of the candle spell, and then the Christian-based version of the candle spell using the Psalms. So I don't agree that the Psalms are full of magic, but Aaron's brother, or Moses' brother Aaron, using the Urim and the Thummim, which is the divination practice within the Jewish people, to me that's a part of magic. Divination is a part of magic. So I agree that would be witchcraft. But that's using a much broader term of witchcraft than I think some people use.
Yeah, I've come to realize.
I will be right back, guys. I just need to use the restroom.
Okay.
Well, there's also there's specific rituals and stuff that a lot of, for example, Christians do that are very okay, so I went up to my grandmother's house and I went to her church because she asked me to. I thought I was going to burst into flames. I didn't, though. I didn't. They lit a candle, a white candle. The pastor's like, this represents purity. And then they lit 3 red candles representing the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And I'm just like, you just did a candle spell, but yet, you don't see that this is spell work of some sort. I think it goes back to the main topic of people putting witchcraft into boxes. It's very fluid, and just because the witchcraft isn't what Christians should be afraid of.
Yeah. Yes. So just to clarify for Zipporah, so when I'm talking about witchcraft, if I use the term witchcraft, I'm referring to usually because it's a European term, witchcraft. I'll use the term witchcraft when I'm talking about European witchcraft. Mm-hmm. However, if I'm talking about another culture, let's say Spanish witchcraft, I'm not going to call it witchcraft. I mean, I might for ease because everyone will know what I'm talking about. But if I specifically want to talk about a tradition within that, I would call it what it's called, Bruja. Or I probably mispronounced it. Bruja. Yeah. Or if I was talking about if I was talking about voodoo, I would use the term voodoo. That's what it's voodoo, even though it would be considered a form of witchcraft. So I'm respectful to the culture and the practice and the tradition and call it by its proper term. If I'm talking about witchcraft, I'm always talking about European witchcraft, but that's because if I'm using the term voodoo, I'm talking about voodoo's form of witchcraft. But there's other people who practice magic that don't practice witchcraft. Like you wouldn't say a ceremonial magician practices witchcraft because they don't. They practice magic.
Right. And see, I think, like I said, like this is kind of where you and I differ, because me being an English speaker, my word for a magical practitioner is witch. A bruja translates directly to witch. So I understand, like, saying, when I say hoodoo, I mean American style influence from a tradition that evolved with Catholic and Protestant deity and became its own tradition. So I do understand you sticking with witchcraft being European based and voodoo being ATR based and stuff like that. I totally get that. It's just, like I said before, me being English speaker, that's the best word that I have to describe what I would consider myself would be a witch. So that's like my channel's Kemetic Witchcraft. It's Egyptian magic, it's Egyptian witchcraft. I guess the proper term would be Kemetic Heka or Heka, because that would be the Egyptian word for magic, Heka. But that Heka is so much more than just the magic. It's speaking with authority. It's commanding an action through speech. And it's not necessarily employing energy manipulation intentionally. It can be a subconscious thing. Me speaking with authority and me having commanding presence and me speaking like this, it can make me seem like I'm more intelligent than I actually am, and you guys have a certain perception about it. Versus me, sitting here like this and talking like this and just kind of being a little bit more laid back and kind of whatnot. So, I don't know. For me, I do understand kind of why you choose to differentiate between those practices. And it definitely makes for a clearer understanding. I think kind of the way that I use the term, which can be kind of muddling. But that's the great thing about a language, it's a tool to kind of express complex ideas and thoughts to each other. That's the whole point of language. So I think that you and I speaking and having a conversation, we can understand each other and what we mean. Instead of just relying on specific definitions for specific words. Yeah. That's just how
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any right answer. It's just interesting. Let me see. A lot of interesting stuff in the chat. Let me see. Somebody was talking about. Yes, it was the Galdabrock. Yes, it was Icelandic book. Yes. Let me see. Rune staves. Icelandic Book of Magic. Okay, yeah. So there were rune staves. Before, where the Norse runes comes from.
Oh yeah.
Let me see. You'll get a lot of pushback from several classes of traditions of magic if you lump them in with witches. That's the term. Yeah, see, that's why I like to distinguish, especially because I did know some people who considered themselves, Kabbalists and considered themselves Christian and practice magic, and they would be insulted if you called what they practice witchcraft. They don't practice witchcraft.
Oh,
they practice magic.
Yeah, they don't practice witchcraft. It's for God. It's kind of what you said before. I've seen a woman who was kind of Latina background, and because she practiced voodoo, it's from God, so it's okay. Mm-hmm. Witchcraft is Satan's work, and so it can be important. Labels can be kind of
important. Between those is.
I know. That's kind of like I'm with you on that. I really don't see the difference between me pulling out a deck of tarot or me or someone else casting runes and a Christian witch
See,
pulling out.
I think I can very easily tell you how I understand the difference between them. I have my altar here in the background. I can go over to my altar and I can light the candles and I can sit before it and I can say a prayer. I can go about lighting candles on my altar and sit quietly in front of it. There's all kinds of things that I can do while lighting a candle. Absolutely none of those actions are magic, the way that I define it. The way that you define it may be completely different. However, if I put myself into an altered state of consciousness, it doesn't have to be a great deal of alter. I don't have to go into other dimensions, but I do have to understand that flicking the switch, now I'm in magic mode. I'm no longer in the mundane, normal world. I'm now in the magical world where anything is possible. Now I go into my altar, I light those candles with that intention. Possibly I have some other ritual that is followed by it, but all of that is intention for something specific to happen. Mm-hmm. So hopefully once I've released the circle and the energies go out and into the universe, they do actually go and change whatever it is that I wanted to do. Somebody lighting candles is going through an action. Maybe they're doing it in a ritualistic manner, but what they're doing is they're following ABC. They're following what they're doing. That's how I perceive a lot of Christians to be doing. Is what they're doing is they're not doing magic. They're doing a routine. They're doing a ritual. Walking up and down the aisles, sprinkling people with incense. Yes, that's very much what happens in a magic circle. But those two things are completely different. It's the same. Sorry, this is my last point. The same thing with a prayer. You can sit there and you can light a candle and you can pray to God or Jesus or a saint or whatever it is that you pray to and ask that God to come and intervene in your life. You can also being an atheistic witch, you can go before your altar, light a candle and wish and manifest and want something to come into your life, and you focus your energy into it. That, my friend, is a magic spell. That is not a prayer or, a ritual.
At a certain rate, I think, at a certain level, I think you're correct. I agree with what you're saying. But on another level, a lot of the things that they do in rituals are very, if not the exact same that a lot of people who practice magic do. So, some level it's different, some level it's the same. I think it's most important when, people or Christians are just like, no, that's witchcraft, we don't do that, we don't tolerate that, but they do, the exact same thing at home. It depends on what it is, of course.
Can you get specific?
Okay, so my parents celebrate the Sabbath for some reason, so they light candles, and my mom does the thing where she inhales the smoke, or she, does this with the smoke. I can't remember what it was. I didn't pay that much attention because we're not Jewish. I didn't think I would have to. Anyway, and she basically chants. It's some sort of prayer. But it would be very similar to me doing that with a bundle of sage. Or maybe some altar candles. Because basically what they have is altar candles. And they anoint them and everything. So,
what's the difference between? So I'm wondering what the state of mind there is when they're doing that. Is it in honor of God, or what is it?
I think it's more an appreciation. I believe it's more of an appreciation ritual of some sort. It is. I think it's in honor of their God. Yes.
Okay, so they're going. They're
purposes. The method is the same.
I missed that. What?
It's for different purposes than I would do it, but the method that they're doing it is exactly the same.
Exactly. The ritual is the same. The action is the same. I'm talking about the intention behind it. That's the key. That's the absolute. That's it. You can do a ritual.
Witchcraft is the method. The purpose, it can be different, but intention and purpose can be different, but the witchcraft is witchcraft. I mean, it's very fluid, and the issue is people thinking that the method is wrong, or is somehow like.
I think it's important to differentiate between ritual and magic, because for me they're not the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not the same at all.
Yeah, there's monkeys in Africa banging on hollow tree stumps, and anthropologists and sorry, I forget what they call them when they study the great apes, but they're basically saying like this is a ritualistic behavior, and I don't think the monkeys are summoning their monkey god in that kind of a sense. So I think that there's a difference to be had between ritual and magic. Sorry, my phone's kind of dark and just fixed it. There we go. So I would also differentiate between prayer and magic, or prayer and witchcraft, or whatever word you want to use. Because for me, prayer is asking for something, whereas witchcraft is causing the change, or magic is causing the change, the manifestation of that wanting change. So prayer is asking, it's more subtle, more passive, where I would say witchcraft is more direct and more intent behind it and more focused. So I would say prayer and magic are different, just like ritual and magic are different. So I don't know, if someone is going up, like a Catholic is going up and lighting a candle and putting their intention into getting a raise and working hard at work and stuff, for me that would be magic, that would be a spell. But for someone going up and lighting a candle and praying for a dead loved one's soul to go to heaven, for me that would not be magic, that would not be a spell. So I think it kind of, like Logan said, it kind of depends on the intent behind the individual.
I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I'm still there are certain like things that they do in the Bible, like the brown snake thing to cure everyone of snake bites or venom or whatever it was, that Abraham made copper twin snakes, and that's where we get the modern like healthcare emblem with the pole with the snakes around it. Yeah.
So I don't remember that, but I do know
the Caduceus.
Yeah.
That's Hermes. That's not Abraham. That's from Hermes.
Like like the snakes around the pole. Well, there's probably the story that they got adapted into the Bible. But like Abraham, there was a plague of snakes and everyone was getting bit. So God told Abraham to fashion copper adders, and he when it was finished, he put it before the Valley of Snakes or whatever. And I forget what happened next. Everyone got healed, or the snakes died. Something like that happened, but it was a weird thing that just.
So who told Abraham to do that?
I believe God.
Okay, so it was okay. So yeah, I understand that. You know, I mean, it's I completely understand the distinction or the separation of ritual and magic. And I think it trips up a lot of people, because we can kind of trick ourselves and get a little confused as to what is the purpose. Why am I doing this? Is this a ritual, or is this a magic, or is this a spell, or is this a prayer, or whatever? And from my experience, and I'm just going from my experience is it's whatever my intention is behind it. If I'm doing something for a ritual, in the case of wanting something to happen, that's different from me, you know, maybe lighting a candle and asking a certain saint or a certain deity to get something done, you know. But that's just the way that I perceive it, you know, and I also perceive a difference between, I just perceive differences between things, and I don't see it as a negative. I see it as understanding what is what, you know. We have different machines and we have different mechanisms for everything. You don't have a single mechanism that works for everything. You have various mechanisms that work for specific situations, and that's how I perceive it. You know, I perceive magic very much as a mechanism for getting something done. So when it comes down to it, in the end, it doesn't matter if who you're praying to or what you're doing. It really depends upon, in my opinion, what your state of mind is and where you're focusing your intention.
Yeah, I would have to agree, because that's something that I kind of struggled with as an atheist. I was like, well, there's so many different cultures out here, and they're all saying conflicting things. Like, you wouldn't call Hindus pagan, even though to me, they're pagan. They don't believe in the Abrahamic God, and that's kind of my definition of pagan. But they get very offended when you call them pagan, because they're pre-Christian, and that's kind of a term that was popularized by Christians in the 14th century, even though it's like Greek in origin, or Latin, I'm not sure.
It's Latin.
It's Latin, okay.
Yeah. Pagani.
Yeah, so for me, I don't know, I've said this before, you gotta choose the woo that suits you. You gotta go with the idea that, feels best to you, or the traditions that you kind of feel are the strongest that you identify with. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like when you're interpreting signs and people ask you, I had 2 robins outside my window flutter by. Does that mean anything? Well, I don't know. Do you have a specific connection to robins? Do you have a specific memory that you strongly associate with robins? It could have been just 2 birds fucking chilling, It happened.
I've seen some about that. Sorry to interrupt, but does this bird crap in front of my hands,
My candle burned like this. What does it mean?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Nobody knows. Smoke a joint. Maybe you'll figure it out.
Or about, like Loken said, it's the intention behind it. How do you feel? What does it make you feel? How does it make you interpret something? So you got to choose the woo that suits you. And that's kind of one of the reasons I even pulled away from deity, being an atheist. You have Geb, who's the Egyptian god of the earth. Very much a man. Very much a father, very much fertility. But then you have Gaia, the Greek goddess of the earth, who is very much a woman, very much a mother, and very much about fertility. So is Geb real, or is Gaia real? Is the earth male, or is it female? So that's kind of one of the ideas about God that I've kind of always struggled with, coming from a polytheistic kind of sense. The best that I kind of got.
Maybe there needs to be multiple fertility gods. Have you seen the fertility rates lately? Damn. For this quarantine, there's gonna be a lot.
Babies. But it's like one of those things of like, you're telling me you're a theist and you believe this God is real, and that this entity is this being, and it does have these attributes, and it does have these characteristics, but the exact same deity in a different form exists in another culture. Are you telling me that deity isn't real? Are you telling me there's only one war god? Or so, like, the concept of polytheism never really sat well with me. The only god that I could really possibly conceive of would be a monotheistic, pantheistic kind of entity. For there to be multiple gods, for me, I would have to kind of take on that egregore got too big for its britches kind of viewpoint, where it's something that was prayed to and offered and thought into being through thousands of years of worship. So that's just me and my take on that.
Yeah, it's very interesting when you start looking at various cultures of pantheons, because if you think about, let's say, 2,000 years ago, you had your culture, and that was it. I mean, you probably did not venture out and really interact with any cultures except maybe for trading and warring and marriages and whatever. But for the most part, you probably just kept to your own little neck of the woods. And then as the world expanded, they started finding out about other cultures and other beliefs and other gods. And I've always been of the opinion that if you already have a polytheistic view, like let's say you have a Greek polytheistic view of the gods, the deities, your relationship with them it makes it easier to accept, like let's say Roman gods, because so here's a similar god to say Apollo, or Helios, and so you can see the similarities between those two gods, and then maybe let's say you encounter a Hindu god, and I don't know who would be a good solar Hindu god, but you can see sort of similarities between it, because you already have that idea of multiple deities, so it seems like it's easier to accept other cultures' deities. And I think monotheism, because there's only one God, there can only be one truth to that God. There can only be one book, there can only be one belief, there can only be one laws, and all these various things around this God. So I think that's one of the reasons why there's been so much strife between, especially the Islam and Christian religions, because each one believes in one God and one God only, and obviously any other God is the false God, the satanic God. So it's very, very difficult for them to accept other beliefs. And I find this all the time whenever I interact with Christians online. I find it very difficult for them, nearly impossible actually, for them to separate the idea that there can be cultures with other beliefs and other gods and other things.
Yeah.
Because their worldview is limited to there's God and Satan. That's it. And every other religion, every other belief is quote-unquote false.
Yeah, no, and then a common thing to do is ask them, well, give me a good reason why Zeus isn't real, or why different gods aren't real. And it's never a good answer. It's never a satisfactory answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I don't find that, and this is just my personal experience, I find that pagans tend to be a little bit more engaging about your beliefs, whereas Christians kind of have a specific narrative, and then it just always turns into, well, prove I'm wrong, which burdens.
You have to prove you're right first, sweetie.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, why should I believe, why do I care about what's in your Bible, Is your Bible true? Yeah, there's a lot of fucked up shit in your Bible. So, I don't know, that's just one of the things that I've always struggled with, is everybody says their God is right and the one true way, and it's like, okay, but everybody says that.
Well, actually,
not a holy book.
Hi to Lucifer.
But I actually find that I actually have a different experience with that, Samora. Maybe I heard you wrong, but my experience has been that it seems like Christians are the only religions that I've ever encountered, and I'm talking about a minority of religion, of Christians, usually very conservative Christians, who are not accepting of other beliefs. And even in, like, there's no pagans that like argue back and forth, like, Zeus is real, no, Zeus is not real, Thor's real, whatever. They don't get into those spats about that, because they're accepting. They understand that this person has a different concept of deities and you have this concept of deities. Same thing with Hinduism or Confucianism or, any other religion in the entire world, because there are almost 4,200 of them. All these other religions seem to get along just fine. But when it comes, and I apologize if I offend anybody here, but it always seems like the two religions we always have a problem with is Muslim religion and Christian religion. These are the two that just do not accept other religions.
No.
It just seems it's been my experience.
No, I agree with you. That's what I was saying. Like, pagans will actually have a back and forth with me, but Christians and Muslims, the monotheistic faith tend to have a very specific narrative, and it's the conversation always turns into prove I'm wrong, or well, you're satanic. That's typically where the conversation kind of
and not valid.
Yeah. It's a lot of, well, you need to get right with Jesus, or you're just Satan's your God, or stuff like that. I don't know if the Jewish people are just kind of keeping quiet, but a lot of the violence and everything kind of stems from the Middle Ages and the Crusades, and of course, Jewish religion was very violent, being a very early form of civilization, but by today's standards, of course. But I think that the most hate comments I get are from Christians and Muslims.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't get random comments from people who follow Islam as much as I do the one video I have on my channel of Islamic Wicca, which was a joke.
Yeah.
And I get so many people making comments about, Islam and Wicca are not compatible. And I'm I type right under it, watch the video. Watch the video. Because I know these people do not watch the video. They don't understand it. I'm agreeing with them. I absolutely agree you cannot combine two completely different religious belief systems that way. But on my other channel, I always get comments from Christians, and it's always the same thing. They always have the same question, the same thing. They don't think I read the Bible. They don't think I believe. It's always the same thing. It's very funny.
I get not understanding the Bible a lot, and I'm like, bitch, have you even read that thing? Because
you can't be a feminist and be a Christian at the same time. You can't. There's no way. There's no way you can be unless you're down with just being submissive all the time and not being a real person.
About the Bible, I mean, you can be a feminist all you want, which is what most Christian feminists do. Nobody reads the fucking Bible. It's long and boring.
Yeah, you get to the begats and you fall asleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you read about the part where if you're not a virgin, you get stoned to death on your wedding night,
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had to take the sheets, and if there was blood on the sheets proving you were a virgin, then you got to live. If there was no blood, then you didn't get to live because you obviously weren't a virgin.
Your marriage sheets go to your parents, who keep them as proof of your virginity. Yeah. Because later down the line, if you piss off your husband and he wants to divorce you, there's very few grounds he can divorce you on. One being you just didn't please him. I think that's actually if you were a slave. But one of the things that he could divorce you on is if you weren't a virgin. So then you would have to go to your parents, who would have to produce the bloody sheets to prove your virginity. Mm-hmm. So that's actually Jewish tradition. If you get raped and you don't scream out loud enough, you could be killed for that. Yeah. If you're a Jewish person who's poor and you enter into slavery, you can be tricked into becoming a permanent slave. Yeah,
we'll let you go, but we won't let your wife and kids and go.
Yeah, we gave you a wife and you produced kids, but and you can go, but they're ours. So if you love your wife and children, you have to stay with them. Then, of course, we've talked about the blood sacrifices and blood magic, Passover, and whatnot, which I don't understand at all. I don't
if we're being honest.
Hmm? Well, how are you going to make an innocent person suffer for your sins? I mean, that's just a cop out. But
it exists in the first place.
I think Logan and I have had this conversation before, but I personally don't think Jesus existed as a person. I don't have a problem with a first century faith healer rabbi named Yeshua. I just don't think that the Jesus of the Bible existed.
I think he's just a mythological character. He's a Christian mythological character. He probably is based upon some real character. It could be based on like most mythological heroes, could be based on several events that happened in history, or it could be just completely made up. I mean, you can go to Ireland, for example. The Toyn is a fantastic mythology from Ireland, and you can actually, if you can hook up with the Seneschal, who's a storyteller in Ireland, and they will walk you along the countryside, and they will point out various points, like this is the rock where Cuchulainn stood up against, and he bled out to death, but he still fought off the men of Ulster. And, this is the ford where he fought, Fergus. And they can go through and tell you this whole story just by walking along the landscape. Same thing with the Bible. Oh, this thing happened in the Black Sea, or this happened, It's the same thing. So that's how I see it. I don't think Jesus was a historical character, not because I'm biased and I don't believe it. It's because I've looked into it, researched it, and nobody has come up with any confirmation yet that there was an actual character named Jesus who performed miracles and did all these various things.
We leave Jesus alone. He did not come to this country to answer your prayer.
No, I kind of somewhat agree. There's, of course, I think there's 6 different Jesuses actually mentioned in the original Hebrew text. Barabbas was actually Jesus Barabbas. And then there was the Jesus that, Paul was like a slave, and Paul didn't want his slave friend to be a slave anymore. But Paul also said, slaves, be obedient unto your master, even the cruel ones, as you are unto Christ. So, what the fuck do I know? But for me, I don't see any evidence of any sort of character named Jesus outside of the Bible. So I don't have any problem with a first century rabbi faith healer who went around and being like, "Begone, demons!" But I just don't see any evidence for any specific character. Egyptians had the same thing, like Logan said. There were several mounds that were Zep-Tepi, which is the mound where the first sunrise occurred, where, depending on the mythology, either Ptah or Ra or Amun or the creatrix kind of came out of the primordial waters and stepped onto the mound, the pyramid, which was land. So there's several places and cities that have that. One of the things that I actually get kind of accused of is the Bible's real because Egypt is a real place, or Israel is a real place, or there's been holy wars that have been fought for years. I'm like, don't you think if your God was real, he would just give you the land instead of making you fight and kill other people for it for the past 2,000 years? What kind of weak-ass God can't actually give you the land he promised? And when you actually get there, there's other people there.
You're right. They have to get rid of somehow.
No, yeah, get rid of the natives. This is for you.
But don't kill them. Just relocate them from earth to heaven.
Yeah.
Don't kill them. Just relocate them.
But keep the reproducing ones for yourself.
Keep the virgin reproducing ones for yourself.
There you go. Yeah, that's why I'm hoping to talk with. I'm hoping to get some Christians onto my channel and talk with them. There's one Christian lady who I talked with, S.J. Thomason. I chatted with her for a little bit. That was just kind of like an impromptu thing that I did on her channel. But she's very much into, historical accuracy or historical evidence, she claims, for Jesus. I'd love to get her on and talk to her about that because, to the best of my knowledge, and again, I haven't studied this topic for quite a few years, but I don't think any new information has come up in the last 20 years that proves that there was a historical Jesus. That doesn't mean that historical events that happened in the Bible didn't happen. It just means that, if you look at the story, if you look at the Bible, a lot of the places are real. Maybe some of the events are real. But the individual characters within the story may not be real, may be fictitious, maybe based on an actual character like, what's his name? Ramses. Wasn't Ramses the real king?
Yeah, Ramses. Yeah. There's several Ramses.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So but the specific one in the Bible story, the Exodus.
They're not actually sure, but they believe that they're referring to Ramses the Great, which is Ramses II.
Oh, okay.
But it's actually an amalgamation of Ramses II and Ramses III, his son. Because Ramses III is actually, and this is coming from Egyptology and not Christian theology or Christian archaeology, there was the Hittites that Ramses II was actually facing, and they were the Asiatics. They were the ones that crossed from the sea. And while they were fighting the Hittites, they also had the Cushites in the south that were fighting them. And during this time, it was actually Ramses III who created the treaty with the Asiatics, the Hittites, and expelled them from Egypt. And during that time, it's believed the Jewish people actually migrated from the Jordan down into the delta, the Egyptian delta, which, following the coastline, you'll hit Egypt. So it's actually believed that that's the time that it happened. And of course, the name Ramses implies that specific time period of Ramses the Great, Ramses III, and the 18th dynasty with Tut and all that. So, given that time period, yeah, I could say that of course the Exodus never happened. But the name Moses comes from Egypt, Tutmos. Moses means actually Pharaoh's daughter. In some of the translations with Hatshepsut, she supposedly adopted a slave child who was found in the river. So there is definitely historical element that could lead credence to some of these stories. But like you said, it's a composite of other entities. You have the law of Hammurabi, which came around long before the Ten Commandments. And if the Ten Commandments are where we get our moral codes, then why did Moses try to hide the Egyptian's body? Why was Cain ashamed of killing Abel? Why did he try to hide Abel? So these laws and stuff, of course, existed before the Bible, and there most certainly are historical references from other cultures that kind of tie into the Bible. So again, I have no problem with Jesus being a real person. I just don't think he was a god or the son of God or any other such nonsense.
So, let's see, we've been going for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah, my phone's getting pretty hot here. I'm going to have to stop pretty soon.
Okay. Yeah, that's all right.
Did we other subject that we wanted? Did we have anything else on the list that we wanted to bang out really quick?
Well, I mean, we kind of touched on them, but we just had gods and deities. We're going to talk about witchcraft. It'd be great if I could read my own writing.
That would be an advantage.
Well, we did culture versus religion.
Culture versus religion.
And then requirements. Oh, and then and then we were going to talk about requirements for traditions. So, meaning like there's specific. Do you want to get into that, Sabora?
Sure, we can do that. Okay? That's fine.
Okay.
Go for
so do you need to worship a deity in order to carry on certain traditions?
Yeah. So why don't you go ahead and start us off, Amber? What do you think?
I absolutely think to celebrate traditions, you don't need to believe in deity. So like modern Jews, a lot of them are atheists, but they carry on the traditions. I do a lot of things. Well, personally, I do a lot of like traditional, kind of like moon magic and stuff like that. That usually some of them. Sometimes I find also coupled give thanks to this goddess or that god. I just kind of carry on the tradition without doing that because I don't believe in that. But like I absolutely think you can do whatever the hell you want as long as you're being respectful of those traditions.
What do you think, Sabor?
Well, I kind of understand that because I have come across in my atheism and talking to certain people, the idea of cultural religion. So you have cultural Judaism or cultural Catholicism where they participate in the rituals like Ash Wednesday or Easter or Good Friday or whatever, being this is Easter weekend. But they'll participate in the rituals, but God doesn't take any sort of forefront in their life. It's not something they really think about. Or they may themselves not believe, but because everybody around them does it, they themselves also participate. And that was something kind of we touched on a little earlier where I said, of course I believed in God. Everybody around me believed in God. Why wouldn't I believe in God if everyone around me is telling me God's real and that's how I brought up and this understanding of God being just a reality. So, for me, I do understand that, and I kind of also, a little bit like Amber, I'll go through the ritual and the motions because it's traditional.
Yeah.
It's, like when
it's your attention that matters.
Right. When I do a ritual for Sekhmet, I will sprinkle natron about the temple because that's something that they did. When I make kapet, I will ritually purify my space because that's something that they did. They had really
you are betraying that person because you're getting the energy from yourself.
Right, but I don't actually believe in the gods, but I will participate in the tradition. Yeah. So I will leave offerings to deities. I will leave offerings to ancestors, even though I personally don't believe in spirits. It's more of the honoring the idea of what that represents. So because I don't believe in spirits, when I offer food, it would be towards the idea of millions and millions and millions of people fuck to get me here. And I am unique in my existence. There will never be another me. There never has been a me before me. And when I die, there will never be a me after me. So my existence, yeah, it's more of the history and the bloodlines and stuff and the family lore that kind of comes with that because we're Irish and my grandmother told me, we're descended from the Fae. So, it's something that, my great grandmother was a changeling, but she said, a changeling.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, that's what it is for me. I do participate in the culture and the traditions while not actually holding the belief. And I don't know, some people may think that is a betrayal. You have in the Bible, God saying, I'd rather have you be with me than against, or I'd rather have you with me or against me than being a fence sitter. Someone between. Someone who's not really sure. But, I don't know. I kind of get the cultural thing and I can kind of see how that could be viewed as negative or a betrayal of the tradition. But hey.
It's only if people want to be that way about it, honestly. If they're
what I was thinking of doing was a format was that we would start a discussion, each one of us would address it, and then we'll open it up for a wider discussion.
Oh, okay.
So let me share my thoughts, and then Amber, and we can open it up for general discussion.
Okay.
But I didn't specify that in the beginning. Sorry.
There you go.
So the way that I view it is, I think if you consider yourself part of a tradition, I think you should honor that tradition. I think it's a certain level of, it's fun to explore and check out beliefs, who believes this, why they believe that, what is this practice like, and it's fun to do that so that you get a better understanding of what you believe and kind of reinforce your own belief systems. But if you're going to follow a tradition, like Gardnerian tradition or some other tradition. So yeah, you want to use their gods. You want to use their practice. In your own personal practice, you may not have a belief in certain deities, or you may feel that another deity is a deity that you feel close to. So that's how I view, requirements for various traditions. I think that it's a fine balance between a free-for-all, do whatever you want, kind of explore and create your own path, and honoring and understanding established traditions and established practices that have come before you. And I think a lot of people kind of want to meld those two, whereas you don't have to do that. You can carry on with a very eclectic type of practice where you don't have any real limits. It's just kind of like what you want to do, and you can let that other tradition be that way that it is. That's the way that I view requirements for traditions. I don't think there's that much requirements for it, but we should be respectful.
So I kind of got a question for you guys. This is something that I find myself doing, but I tend to be very traditionalist and kind of agree with Lilokin in that if you're going to do the tradition, then you should honor the tradition and do it historically correct to the best of your ability and understanding. But do you guys find yourself doing a lot of gatekeeping, or what you would be considered gatekeeping, where you're like, well, that's not technically historically accurate? I think, Lilokin, you've touched on this before, where you're like, I used to do that, but it's just so much of a waste of energy that you personally don't do it anymore. What is your take on gatekeeping? Is it something you find yourself doing a lot, or trying to correct other individuals on it, or what?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not gonna lie. Absolutely, I am that way. But I feel that voice is needed. I don't hear this on YouTube. I don't hear it at all. Mine is very much a minority voice. So yeah, I do, in a sense, gatekeep, But I think that there's a need for it, I didn't come onto the internet to discover witchcraft. That wasn't what I did. This is something that I practiced when I was 13 years old. I've read a lot. I've studied a lot. It doesn't make me a great magician or a great witch or anything like that. But it does, I feel, put me in a position to understand that how it's evolved and how it's changed, and what traditions have come out of that. And nowadays, I think it's fantastic. You go onto YouTube and there's all these various people who have all these various ideas, and I think that that's great. And I think there's a lot of exchange of ideas and exchange of things. But unfortunately, a lot of that information is kind of like, it's vague, like where did this come from? It's kind of vague, It's not exactly known, like crystals. Why do people put crystals on their altar, or why do they do the various things that they do? And I think that if we look back, for example, if you look back at your own practice and you say, why do I do this, and you kind of research and find out where it stems from, you might be pleasantly surprised, And they do stem from something.
Yeah. What about you, Amber? Do you find yourself doing a lot of gatekeeping, or kind of going, hey, that's not necessarily historically accurate?
It depends on what it is. So a lot of the things that are important to me, like if somebody was to say, for example, witches were terrifying people in the 16th century, and that's why the government tried to kill them all, because they were trying to murder people. That's where I'd be like, that's not historically accurate. It was actually used as, we're just going to kill anybody for any reason because we can. The rest of it is somebody wants to be like, this means this to me, I do it like this. I don't give a shit. I mean, I do think historical accuracy is needed, but some of the smaller things I don't sweat about, so.
I find myself doing it quite a bit, and maybe I should even back down a little bit. But my interest lying in Egypt. There's a lot of misconceptions about Egypt and Egyptian witchcraft or magic or whatever you want to use. So I find myself going, no, that's a Hellenistic point of view and not something the Egyptians originated with, like Tahuti being Thoth coat, being linked. That didn't necessarily come from
the only sound we heard is Logan walking away. I'm so glad we got like 10 seconds of that prime time with just like
well, I find myself doing a little bit of gatekeeping, actually a lot of gatekeeping, just because Egypt is very misunderstood. Like nope, that's Hellenistic. Nope, that's Greek. Nope, that's definitely not Egypt.
The chat is getting excited because some people are thinking you're going to start stripping.
Very sexy walk away.
All we heard, like your sound trumped everyone else, so we just heard you walking away.
Oh, people thought I was going to strip?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nobody, trust me, nobody wants to see that. Trust me, I have perfect vision of what it looks like. You don't want to see that.
What are we missing?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to step away, but I don't have a way I could turn off my camera, so I just had to put something over it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't mind if people think I'm an asshole.
They're going to put that regardless.
But I think that there is a need for it. I think that people do need to. I just think that people are just they're just too accepting and just too gullible. You know, I mean, this is your path. This is your tradition. Respect it. Understand what it means. I mean, if you are going to celebrate under a full moon, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, are you just doing it because, well,
it's a full
that's
moon.
what I'm supposed to do?
Yeah.
It's like if you don't have a reason for doing a ritual, why the hell are you doing it? If you're going to celebrate Samhain and you're going to celebrate your ancestors and you're going to remember your ancestors and you're going to serve them food or share a meal with them or you're going to do something with them, there has to be some meaning to it. If there's no meaning to it, why do you do it? You know, that's why I think it's really funny. Sorry, and I'll finish with this last one. But that's why I find it really funny when I talk to people who call themselves witches who are not Wiccan, and yet they celebrate the Sabbats. Why? Why do you celebrate the Sabbats? Why do you celebrate the full moon? It doesn't make any sense to me. If you have a reason for doing it, if you practice witchcraft that is not religious, it's just a craft. It's just like, there's woodcraft, there's witchcraft, there's that's a craft for you. That's how you view it.
Yeah.
Why do you practice Samhain? Why do you practice Beltane? Why do you believe in the gods? Why do you believe in fairies? Why all of these things? If it is just a practice, and that's one of the big questions I have for most people.
Well, we've talked about this before. I think we've all three talked about this before, but you get out of witchcraft what you put into it. And if you're just going through the motions because someone told you that's what witches do, you're not understanding what you're doing. You don't understand the purpose behind what you're doing, and you're not going to get out of it.
You're not going to get jack shit doing that.
Right. You're not, or people who just go into it seeking power. You're not, that's not what witchcraft is. That's not what it's about. And
why can't I?
What was that?
Hermione Granger did this. Why can't I?
I don't.
From the Harry Potter? Oh my god.
I understand who Hermione Granger is. I don't understand the reference you're making.
Well, because a lot of people go into witchcraft thing, it's going to be like Harry Potter.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's not Harry Potter. You're not going to shoot lightning bolt out of your asshole.
At least not intentionally.
Taco Bell says otherwise.
Taco Bell is different. But you're 100% going to get out of it what you're putting into it. It's like Logan said. Are you doing this just because someone told you that's what witches do. Why are you worshiping under a full moon if you have no connection to any kind of moon deity or any kind of understanding of the moon or any kind of significance in the moon of the tradition that you hold? So I do agree that you really shouldn't be doing things just because someone tells you that's what witches do or that's what pagans or atheists do or whatever else. I think it's important for the individual to kind of look into what it is that they're doing and why they're doing it and have a full understanding. Because I'm 100% a gatekeeper. I'm like, well, that's wrong, because for me, I want to believe as many true things and as few false as possible. And while I understand we are all irrational at times and we can't get things 100%, I still like to be right. Because who likes to be wrong?
So somebody in the chat, I think, sums it up really well. This is from Milton Knowles, the insane witch king. I am involved with witchcraft to gain power over my enemies, to take over the world and bring it into a new age under my rule. I'm already taking over my backyard. I'm working on the front yard. Yes, let's not forget that our ultimate goal is to take over the world, but you have to keep that under the wraps for right now, okay?
We need to get paid for that, okay? We've been doing a solid job, okay? Checks.
Yeah, we got Billy Schnoebelen, we got John Pounders, we got all these people exposing us. You know, we gotta try to keep it under wraps, and we're actually trying to take over the world.
You know,
kind of off topic, but how come Lylokin is always the Illuminati member, and I can never get a witch to tell me that I'm an Illuminati member? I get called a Satanist a lot.
I'm a Satanist. How bullshit. I have a card and everything.
I think it's because Lylokin, or maybe it's just because I'm kind of loud and obnoxious, but Lylokin.
No, it's because I'm of a higher rank. Someday you'll be higher rank, and then you'll be included in the Illuminati. But right now they have to keep you in the dark.
Well,
keep paying your dues. Keep paying your dues.
Yeah.
You'll get there.
You keep sitting down at Planned Parenthood, receiving all of the extra. You know,
I ate the fetuses.
And don't forget, we have to infiltrate the churches too, and cause havoc in there.
Yeah.
Cause witchcraft.
Don't you dare listen to the Jonas Brothers.
Can we glue googly eyes on the Jesus statues?
Somebody's freaking bored.
Well, that was a satire joke, a story that I shared, and Logan's like, "Is this real? Did someone really do this?"
Yeah, because what it is because I looked at it and I go, "Oh, this is." I mean, I thought it was a joke, but then I went to the website and I read through it, and I was like, "Wait a second, is this a joke?"
It's presented as not a joke, but it's 100% a satire.
Yeah, but it was like you have to actually read through it and realize that there's no link to the original article, because that's often what I'll do. Is somebody will post an article and they'll post it on there, let's say, whatever, Trump said this, and so you go in and you look at the actual footage and you realize, oh, that's not what he said. They clipped that part of it. So you have to go in, look at the article, find out the source for it. It's really annoying because...
To be fair, though, I'm more disappointed on average with what he actually says, which is versus what they said he said.
Yeah, right. I know. I use Trump because it's an easy one, but it applies to everything. They'll say something about something. They'll write an article about it, but you actually have to read the article. For example, somebody will claim an article about two individuals in Florida or Nevada or wherever they were who killed somebody in the name of Satan. But you actually go and you look and you read this article, you find out, no, these were two kids who were, crazy and decided to kill somebody, and that's what they did, and everything else was included. So you find out that there's bullshit, and then the bullshit's based on some truth, but the truth is not exactly, the truth is not always accurate.
Well, that's true of like you said, a lot of things. It's not just the media. It can be true of religion too. You know, like we talked about this a little bit earlier. No one really reads the Bible. You get to the beginning and you get a little bored. So you rely upon what someone else tells you the story is, and you're not getting the full truth, and you have a corrupted view of what reality is. So again, you get out of it what we put into it, no matter if it's politics, religion, or witchcraft, or whatever. It's really down to the individual to apply their brain and understand the full content.
And let's see, just kind of going over. So we're going to wrap this up.
Yeah, we got any questions from the chat. Maybe exactly. Any questions?
Yeah. So if people have any questions, let us know. But let's see. Here's one comment from Milton. He says, "When I do a ritual involving the moon, it is to do with the moon phase and how it adds in banishing or invoking. Of course, when you banish, you must invoke, and when you invoke, you must banish." So that's actually something I'd really like to talk about. I don't know where that comes from. I think that the idea of banishment, for example, if you look at the lesser ritual of the banishing pentagram, if you look at that ritual, it is it's banishing. It's banishing evil away. So it's putting up almost like a protective barrier. But I don't believe that anything is invoked during that. I could be mistaken unless you perceive the Kabbalistic cross as an invocation.
I've used a banishing pentagram to banish things from my apartment. That's exactly what I used it for. I don't know where the invoking thing came from.
I don't understand that, but I would like to. But anyhow, the moon phase, yes, I agree. The moon phase, that's what I was talking about earlier. Like if you do a ritual at the full moon, what is the purpose of it? You know, and if you're doing during the waxing of the moon, what is it? Is it something that you're trying to bring to you or trying to emphasize in your life? And if it's waning, is it something that you're trying to get rid of? You're trying to minimize it, and that's using the moon, and that's contagious magic. It's sympathetic. I think it would be considered more sympathetic magic because the concept behind that is that as the moon itself begins to diminish, so shall whatever it is that you want to get rid of. Same thing if you want to bring something into your life, the moon is getting fuller. So, but that's sympathetic magic.
The Egyptians had a completely different view of the moon. The moon was, the moon was linked to Tahuti and Khonsu and a few other deities. But the moon was also linked to the eye of Horus. You have the right and left eye of Horus, one being the sun and one being the moon. And the most popular story is that Set destroyed Horus's eye. So when the moon is getting smaller, it's attacking and it's bad and it's damaging. And when the moon is getting bigger, then it's healing and becoming brighter and bigger. So it is related to diminishing and full, kind of how the European kind of basis, I guess I would say would be the understanding would be diminishing and getting fuller, but it's linked more specifically with healing. Because the Egyptians, everything the Egyptians did was related to healing or destruction. From my understanding, bringing something
healing and destruction.
Yeah, if you look at all their magical plants and stuff, every plant they have has a magical purpose for healing.
Yeah, this one tells you, this one doesn't.
Yeah, I'd have to break out my book, but given the history, the time period, my understanding of what they were going through, there's a lot of injuries. There's no medical care. It's not like they're going to pop into the local health clinic and get that bone set. It was go to the priest and have the priest pray over it and set the bone. They did have advanced medical knowledge for their time, but it's still extremely primitive by today's standards. There's no vaccines. There's no antiseptic anything. They figured out honey had antiseptic properties by smearing it on wounds, but that it was it's magic. It's not really antiseptic. It's magic. So yeah, the Egyptians different concept of related to healing.
So, but we'll definitely have to. We'll think of other topics. We kind of like just before we went on. This was kind of like a spontaneous thing. I just called up Amber and Zavora, and I said, "Hey, you want to hang out and talk about atheistic witchcraft?" That's how we got here. But we'll probably do this on a regular basis. We'll talk offline and set up specific dates and times that might work out the best for us. We don't know how long it will last because, like I said, we just started it. But maybe we'll turn this into a series and we can talk about other things. So if you do have questions that you would like to have us answer, put it in the comments section below, and we'll definitely look into that. And if it's something that we feel ties in with an episode that we'll have coming up, we can definitely answer it for you. But with that said, if there's any other people that have any questions, now's the time to type it in. What were you going to say?
Oh, yeah, that sounds pretty good. I can send you my work schedule. It's pretty solid right now.
And I'm home now, so.
Amber's always home.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that sounds pretty good. If we could have like specific questions related to like atheism and witchcraft or paganism, I would take those first just because that's kind of the whole point of this is to say, hey, we're atheists and we're pagan and it's okay. So.
We're atheists, we practice witchcraft, we collect strange rocks and sticks in the wood. Suck it.
I know, but.
I don't. But yeah, and I think that one thing that we definitely didn't talk about is how we justify our own practice, and I think that this is something that I've definitely spent some time thinking about. But
there's a need to justify practice in witchcraft. Like, is there a need to justify why you do yoga? I mean,
no, it's still a good idea to have an answer ready if someone. Well, at least for me, just because I've had this conversation before. Like, well, if you're a witch, how can you have, or if you're an atheist, how can you have any belief in magic? And it's like, well, for me, they're not linked, and I've had results, and I've had like repeatable results.
Well,
that's why you keep a journal.
Well, like so, sorry, didn't mean to.
Okay. It's okay. So, like, for me, justifying my witchcraft, I'm personally not convinced that it's not some post hoc rationalization where I think I'm seeing results, where I'm only counting the hits and ignoring the misses. I'm not entirely convinced that that's not the case, because humans are not rational. We tend to be very instinctual, and thinking is hard, and who wants to hurt their brain? So, for me, it's definitely more of I'm not convinced it is real. It's just something that I believe works for me, so I continue to use it.
Okay, so here's a good question from Mary. So what made you all decide that atheism was for you? So I guess we'll go ahead and start with that, Amber.
Well, the idea of a god does not make sense to me. One god or many gods, they don't, there's no evidence that they exist. Nothing appeared to me, nothing, went out of its way to, assure me that they are worthy of my worship. And also that particular god was used to oppress me, and my gender was not flying with me either. The way I justify my magic, I guess, if you want to put it in that term, cause magic isn't pretending to be a god. Magic isn't a god in itself. It's just the manipulation of energy. That's not a god in itself. So I can be atheist, and I can practice witchcraft, and still be an atheist, and not contradict myself. Does this make sense?
If it makes sense to you. No, I mean,
Yeah.
it's your expression. What about you? Were you done, Amber?
Yeah.
Okay. What do I use it for?
Well, for me, it's not that I decided atheism was right for me. It's just that, like I said before, I had trouble connecting to the concept of a God. And when I was 12, I kind of realized the Christian concept of God was horseshit because I read the Bible. But I took the idea of a God being real extremely seriously. So I went looking for God because I was brought up in a culture that said God was real and this is something we just all accepted. So I looked at different cultures that all had gods, and it's, of course, every culture. The Greek gods, to me, just seemed very petty and very human. The Norse gods, again, human, and I just found humanity in all the deities. And it wasn't until, like, a conversation with Loken a few years ago where he says, well, you know what, I'm an atheist, that it kind of clicked that, you know, I have no evidence for God. I have no good reason to believe in a God. And after searching for God for years and years and years and years, I found no God. So the lack of evidence is what kind of made me believe that there is no God. And I'm not of the agnostic kind of, I don't know if there's a God or not, because of course we all cannot say that we know that there's a God or gods. We can't say that. I'm convinced that there is no God. I'm not anti-theist where I believe that religion is and God concepts are horrible and they need to be done away with, but I'm an atheist because I don't see a God at all, any evidence for any God.
Damn it, Liloken, you're just corrupting all of us with your atheist.
Your fault, Liloken.
Exactly.
Working for the devil.
Thus my icon.
Illuminati.
Yeah, so for me, it's, I don't know when you came in, Mary, but kind of like when we started off, I talked a little bit about how my opinion of it evolved. I started out when I was younger being a monotheist, meaning that I believed in God, and I kind of like believed what my other siblings believed. And then I started thinking for myself and then kind of like having an idea of what God would be. I didn't understand the concept of sin and all these other things included in that. I felt that if a God made us in its image, then all of our aspects of ourselves would be, well, natural. They wouldn't be unnatural. They wouldn't be sins. They would just be our expressions of ourselves. And I still feel that that's the problem. I still feel that there's a disconnect between what an actual deity would believe and what man believes. But anyhow, from that, I sort of adopted a polytheistic viewpoint. And I actually enjoyed the idea of polytheism because there was this concept that there was a goddess of there was a god of death, and there was a goddess of fertility, and there was a goddess of the harvest. Or there was a hunter god. There was all these various gods, but they were also reflections and aspects of ourselves. So over time, I started doing away with polytheistic deities, gods that are beyond myself, that were superhuman and supernatural, and just understand that these were just aspects of, to use the Jungian term, the collective unconscious. And that's how I perceive it today. So I perceive gods in that way, and I actually put much more emphasis on mythology and how we interact with nature, like how you celebrate the cycle of the year. It very much ties in with our survival, and I think now it's very easy for us to separate those two things because we go down to the corner store, we buy whatever it is that we want, go home, cook it up, and eat it. Back then, it was not that easy. You had to go out and you had to hunt it, or you had to go out and you had to grow it, and you had to protect it, and you had to keep it from getting disease, and all these various things. We're very tied up with it. So it's very easy to get disconnected from what I call to be sort of like the core aspect of, for lack of a better term, paganism, even though paganism is such a huge umbrella term. But yeah, I agree with Zipporah. If somebody presented evidence to me that there was a deity of some sort, I would definitely change my mind. Like if there was some event that is not explainable, yeah, I would completely change my mind. However, from this point, this has not happened to me. I've gone into circles and I've invoked demons. Demons have not come. I've gone into circles, I've invoked spirits. Spirits did not come. I've gone into divination mode. I've tried to access hidden worlds, and I've tried to concentrate and perceive beings that lived outside of my perception and have not been able to do it. So I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in spirits. I don't believe in gods. I don't believe in deities. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in devils. I don't believe in all those things. I believe that human beings are capable of all these horrible actions that we put onto other things, and to not understand that is to not fully embrace what it means to be a human being.
Maybe they don't like you.
Yeah, that's what it is. They just don't like me.
Yeah.
I don't like them. They don't like me. We don't get along.
Well, my phone's dying,
Okay.
and it's too hot to charge. So I think this is actually a good place to say goodbye.
Yeah.
But I do have a question for maybe next time that we could all consider and ponder and whatnot. But maybe it might be something worth looking into. How has science influenced your practice, or has science influenced your practice? String theory, quantum mechanics, whatever it may be, quarks. Has that influenced your understanding of it? So I thought that would be a good question for us to cover next time.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good idea. So cool. So with that, I guess we'll just go ahead, because I didn't have a time to put nameplates in and everything. Do you want to share your various, whatever it is, your YouTube channel or your social media, so people could go and check you out? We'll start with Zipporah.
Sure. I've actually got 2 YouTube channels and a Facebook. I don't really keep social media just because it's a pain in the ass, and I have an actual life that exists beyond the internet. So you can find me on YouTube under Comedic Witchcraft, which is going to be all of my pagan-y, witchy kind of stuff. And then I've also started up a new YouTube channel specifically related to atheism and tackling other religions, and that is Conversations About God. And then, of course, you can find me under Facebook as Deborah Maloney. That's Maloni, Maloney. So, yeah. That's where you can find me. Oh, and of course, if you guys want to email me, comedicwitchcraft@gmail.com.
Okay. And Amber?
Oh, well, I have several very poorly edited videos on my YouTube channel, Amber Says Nope, and I also have an Instagram on that same name. That's more for, like, my art and stuff, but I also do, like, discussions of, like, witchcraft and stuff like that on there. My Facebook, I like to keep it private, but, like, those are the 2 things that you guys can find me on.
Sure.
Okay, well, cool. And I'll put all of our information down below. I haven't done it yet, but obviously this is my channel, so if you're here, you probably know about me. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter as Lilocan ACS. Again, I'll put the links below so people can go and check it out. And thanks all for coming out and for being with us. And I'm going to hopefully, now that I'm trying to get back into doing the Google Hangouts, I'm going to see what I can do with it. I don't know if I'll have more Google Hangouts, but we'll definitely get together and have another one of these shows at this topic. Alrighty.
Well, yeah, well, thanks for having me out.
So the 2 of you don't leave after I disconnect, but I'll go ahead and say goodbye to everybody in the chat. So goodbye. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.